All right, let's get started. We are honored to have lead these discussions licensed attorney and professional fiduciary Darby Jones, a member of the Florida and Maryland Bar. Darby serves on the executive council of the Real Property Probate Trust Law section of the Florida Bar and is a registered professional guardian. Darby is also the founder and executive director of the Professional Fiduciary Council of Florida. Today's topic is called Don't Put Me in One of Those Places. We've heard that term many times when AARP members have given us a call. We're going to explore various healthcare housing options. Darby, what can you tell us about the different care facilities and the level of care we might expect from each of those?
Well, we've got a lot to talk about today. So if there's one thing I recommend that you do is to have a piece of paper handy and take notes. As a professional fiduciary, I serve in a variety of capacities, including power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, trustee, et cetera, for a lot of people. In order to get named in those capacities, I interview and am interviewed by many clients who want to decide whether I'm a right fit for that. During that interview process, I get instructed about a lot of things, and very often it's whatever you do, Darby, don't put me in one of those places. So today, I'm sure a lot of you are also worrying about that moment in your life where someone may want to put you in one of those places, or you've been told by your loved one or someone that you may be power of attorney for or healthcare surrogate for, and they're telling you not to put them in one of those places. Whatever you do, don't put me in there. Well, what does that mean really? So today we're going to talk about those places and what are they? Whether one's right for you or not. How much do they cost? What options do you have if one of those places is really not a good fit? So we're going to cover a lot of material today. Worrying about one of those things, that could be another episode, but worrying about one of those places is certainly an understandable and valid worry. I use this conversation when someone tells me that as an opportunity to talk about a larger concept. And that larger concept is, what is your idea of growing old? What does that mean to you? What is, when you envision it or try to envision what that means, what is it for you? And it's hard for most of us to talk about that. And it's hard for most of us to really articulate what that means to us. Remember when we're around young kids, our own kids, and people are like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, they don't know what they're going to want to be to grow up. So imagine if you at one point in your life imagined that you were going to grow up and be X. Did that ever really happen? You know, how did you get to where you are in your life today? It certainly wasn't what you thought you were going to be when you were 8 or 9 years old and being asked that question. So I kind of see this as kind of the same thing. We don't know what to expect. So I want us to take a moment here. I'm going to walk you through some things I want you to think about that's going to help you maybe envision and conceptualize what growing old means to you. For example, we've never experienced being old ourselves. We're not old yet. Many of us have a very different idea of what old is. And it's hard to know what it's going to feel like until we get there. And so we kind of think, that's a tomorrow problem. Another reason we can't really talk about it is we've never experienced through a loved one. Maybe many of us have never had a friend or parent or spouse who has gone through some of the experiences of being in a facility or not. We don't know what to expect. Many of us have never been to one of those places, so we don't even really know the monster in the closet yet, or if there is a monster in the closet. Or we've had the experience and it has not been pleasant, and we don't want to think about it, and we just don't think it's going to happen to us. We're all going to live forever, right? We have a hard time imagining the future, but we're going to try today to help you with how to sort of put some real facts and real ideas around your future and some of the choices that you have to make. So when you're trying to find your future, These are the things I want you to think about. Think about your own personal family history from a health and a medical standpoint. How did your parents age? How did they pass? What chronic issues were common in your family history? How is your life different from your parents or siblings that may impact that medical history or trajectory? Do you have a safe and supportive living environment? Is it one level? Do you live in a community? Are there neighbors, services, family support, friends, trustworthy vendors, decluttered house? And by the way, speaking of decluttered houses, our next episode is going to talk, we're going to go a deep dive into decluttering homes and moving and transitioning as a senior or an aged person. Do you have your affairs in order? Do you have an updated estate plan? And I have to give a shout out to our very first episode in January, where we also took a very thorough look at an estate plan and who is your power of attorney and who is your healthcare surrogate and why that's important and what is a fiduciary. So I recommend you go back and look at the January episode. Have you informed your fiduciary, your power of attorney, healthcare surrogate about your goals and wishes and what you do or don't like? So those are all kind of concepts that I want you to really examine, look in the mirror and answer those questions for yourself. Is your financial house in order? Now, some of those thoughts that you're going to now hopefully think about may change some of your behaviors today that will make planning for the future a much more realistic and easy path for you. Now, this is not a pass or fail test. Okay, this is not a right or wrong answer. Everybody has a different path for aging, and everybody has a different idea of what quality of life is for them. That is why it's important for you to think about it and for you to be instructing and sharing those goals with other people, because no one else can know what's in your own heart or mind about how you envision your aging. So let's talk about our options. Go to assisted living, go to an independent living first, stay home or not. Those are kind of the things we want to think about and we're going to talk about. In fact, we have a poll question. Chandra, if you want to post that poll question to get us get your juices flowing and for us to kind of understand some of y'all's concerns and priorities when facing these issues. Are you worried about your future cost of care? Now, unfortunately, we could have probably many choices, but we have 3 choices to choose from. So please take a second to do that. I had to take it myself to get the screen empty. So to begin with, who pays for long-term care? There are only 3 ways to pay for long-term care: privately, long-term care insurance, or Medicaid. Okay, Medicaid is a benefit. There are also some minimal VA benefits as well with long-term care. Medicaid is not Medicare. Medicare does not pay for your long-term care. It does not pay for your long-term care. Okay, here are the results. So most of you have done some planning. That's great. That's good news, but you still have concerns. So, and a good portion of you have not done any planning. So we're going to hopefully get you off onto the right foot today. So thank you for answering those questions. Appreciate it. So Medicare does not pay for long-term care. And I want to harken back to something from our last episode about hospital visits. The only time Medicare is helpful and pays for long-term care is after a hospital episode, a discharge from a hospital. And that discharge from the hospital has to be a result of 3 days of being admitted. We spoke in our last episode about how important it is to actually understand whether you're admitted to the hospital or whether you're there just for observation, because that's going to make the difference between whether Medicare is going to pay for your rehab or not. So go back and watch episode 2 also. So to begin with, I want you to know that today I am just going to give a very broad overview of facilities. We're also going to talk in broad senses about the costs and expenses of the various facilities. Every state is different. So keep that in mind, that I'm coming from a perspective of one state. Your state may have a very different licensing regime as well as costs. Facilities vary greatly, such as in staff ratios, licensing, the services they provide. So just make sure that what I'm saying today is really coming from a generality standpoint. I'm also going to discuss a little bit about long-term care and whether it is or is not something you want to investigate, and what is Medicaid really, and how you can become eligible for Medicaid or not. Hopefully by the end of the program today, we will dive into those two issues a little more in depth. I also want you to understand before we get there that long-term care policies are very varied. There are all kinds of different types of policies. So you need to be careful when choosing and if the right policy is for you. On average, and I want you to remember this might be something you want to write down because this information is going to be important when we get to the cost and comparisons. According to the Administration on Aging, only 1 in 4 individuals will require more than 2 years of long-term care. Now, when we say long-term care, what that really means is nursing home. It's what we all would traditionally have thought of as a nursing home. Long-term care is really not considered assisted living, okay, or independent living. Just because you're in a facility doesn't mean you're actually in long-term care. So only 1 in 4 are going to require more than 2 years of long-term care, nursing home care. Only 15% of the population will need longer than 2 years. Those are two very important statistics I want you to remember. Of the people that do stay longer or need more than 2 years of long-term care, women tend to need 3.7 years and men tend to need 2.2 years. And 1/3 of the population won't need any long-term care at all. So in some ways, that's some very good news. In my perspective, the fact that only 1 in 4 of you will need more than 2 years of long-term care is good news. So now I want to ask Chandra and Michelle to enter into our chat box a subject that I'd like for you all to ponder while we move forward. Now, this question is important, but there isn't just one answer. So we thought we'd ask you in the chat box to respond to this subject so that you can put in your thoughts. And this will be very interesting for us to review. And maybe while I'm talking, Chandra and Michelle can maybe point out an important one that comes along. So what are one of those places? Keep in mind again that every state is different. Every state has a different agency that supervises and is charged with licensing and inspecting these facilities. And maybe there's a website or a portal that actually rates and qualifies these institutions. And sometimes you can go to that website when you're looking for a facility and you can find the reviews or their ratings. Now, I'm guessing that a lot of people, hopefully all of you, are familiar with Yelp. Okay, so when you're looking to go out to dinner and you look at Yelp reviews, that may or may not change your mind about going to that restaurant. But the truth is, Yelp reviews are not to be relied upon. You know, like a restaurant, that restaurant might be great the night that person went there because the chef was fantastic, but the next week the chef is gone. Okay, so it could be a very different restaurant when you get there. Same thing with facilities and these ratings. They're a piece of information, but they're clearly, in my opinion, not something you'd want to base your decision upon. So what is an assisted living facility? An assisted living facility is probably the first introduction most of us have had to long-term care or institutional care. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was a very new idea. And the population of people going into assisted at that time were much younger and actually much more active and almost viewing it as almost a resort type environment where their meals are prepared, they have a pool, there may be trips to the golf course. And so it looked like a really nice sort of relaxing next step for a lot of older individuals. But today it's a very different thing. Today, assisted livings really have a very different population. People are coming into assisted living in much weaker states and much less healthy than they were back when they were first built or instituted. So watch out for the marketing for these facilities, because their marketing today is very different than it was back in the 70s. Today, they're marketing to primarily the children of the parents. And so the children are kind of being convinced that they want to take care of their parents and keep them in a safe environment. And so it's almost, I hate to say this, but it's almost like when you're planning for a funeral, and sometimes some of the expenses and choices you're being provided or you're choosing because of guilt or responsibility. So be careful not to get trapped into a sales pitch or a reason to put your parents in, or a spouse or a loved one, into a facility based on the marketing or the salesperson trying to encourage you. The services of an assisted living, there are very different levels of assisted living, and I'm going to talk about those levels briefly. But your standard assisted living is really equipped to help with your ADLs. That's called activities of daily living, ADLs. If you don't know what that is already, you will. Activities of daily living are dressing, feeding, transferring, and bathing. Dressing, feeding, transferring, and bathing. And when I say transferring, that means like getting up from a chair, getting into your bed, getting out of your bed, getting in, walking, just being able to move about. Those are your activities of daily living. Assisted living facilities are presumably supposed to help with those services. Now, if you go up in licensing to what they call an ECC license, that's called an extended congregate care. And there, the nursing level is to help with feeding tubes and oxygen. Now, when you're interviewing or looking at assisted living, you want to look at their license, and you want to especially look at what sort of nursing services they do have or don't have. Is there a nurse even on campus? Is it just a phone a nurse? If the nurse is there, what days is the nurse there? What days are the nurses not there? Very often, assisted living facilities are completely void of any medical staff on the weekends and evenings. So it almost is just like having an apartment. Yeah, they have communal meals, but there really is no medical support there on a 24-hour basis. And that's a misconception for a lot of people. And I hate to come across as sarcastic as I might be, but you don't get a lot of assistance in assisted living. It's pretty basic services, unless you get to one of these higher licensed facilities. The next one up is a limited nursing service, LNS license. And that nursing care is going to be more available. They're going to be able to handle wound care and also some basic nursing services. Then you have limited mental health license, and that's where you have a memory care ward. We'll talk a little bit more about memory care in a minute. So that's assisted living. So what do you look for? If you're really thinking that's something that a loved one or yourself may need, again, look at the licensing, especially the medical licensing for nursing services. Second most important thing, in my opinion, is the convenience factor. Where is it located? Is it close to whoever's going to be visiting you? If you have a daughter or a son or a family member or a spouse, get the assisted living facility that's closest to you so that it doesn't become a drudgery or a task to be able to get to that facility. I would sacrifice quality with convenience. Also think about whether the personality of the person fits. Is the person a social butterfly, or is the person a loner? Does it smell good when you go inside? What is the smell? I'm sure you've all heard of that issue. Also, are the people smiling? Are the employees happy? Interact with them, ask them questions, talk to the staff. Do they seem to be pleasant? Are they happy to be there? What is the campus layout? I very much prefer a campus that's one level, one floor, sprawled out. Because if you go to an assisted living facility that's multi-floor, which unfortunately sometimes is not is unavoidable, the challenge is that you're stuck with elevators. So let's say the assisted living is on floor 8, but the nursing is on floor 2, and all the CNAs are on floor 1. Well, you're up on the 8th floor pushing your button for assistance, and now they're going to have to deal with the elevators and whether the elevators are functioning or not in order to be able to get to you in a timely fashion. So just keep in mind that if it's a one floor type campus, it tends to be a little more efficient with staff. And then another thing I always tell people to look for is the management longevity. How long has the manager been there, the executive director or the director of nursing? Those are the two people who are the most important you want to talk to. Resident director, director of nursing. Also, how many times has it been bought and sold? These campuses, especially chains, get bought and sold quite frequently. So if you can get an idea of the management longevity, that is a really good piece of information. Okay, so that's assisted living. Now let's talk about CCRC, which is a continuing care retirement community. Those are a fairly new concept. What that means is they're going to offer independent living, assisted living, skilled care, and memory care all on the same campus. Now, if I lost my mind and decided I needed to go to a facility, that's where I would want to be. Because in my opinion, standalone assisted living facilities tend to be very pretty. They'll have the pool, they have the nice landscaping, but they only offer assisted living services. And it's inevitable that as time goes by, something may happen and you're going to need a little bit more service than what they may be able to provide. Their licensing may limit them on being able to give you the services that you really need, and you'll have to move to a skilled care. But in one of these continuing care retirement communities, you don't have to move. It's all there on the same campus, the same location. So it's a little bit less traumatizing to have to move through those stages of care. If you're one of those 1 in 4, remember? And then also look at all the same criteria we just talked about: smell, feel, the staff, the geographic convenience. The other thing you want to make sure is in these continuing care retirement communities, it's often asked that you pay a very large sum up front, sort of a deposit. On top of that, you also have monthly rent. So it can be expensive to move into one of these communities. It's also not necessarily always a requirement. They advertise often that they need to have this big lump sum buy-in, but they also very often will allow you to just rent and not pay the lump sum. I would encourage you not to buy into a community because for a variety of reasons, but one is you may decide you don't like it anymore, or they may decide that they don't like you anymore. So then you're kind of stuck in this community where you may not be very happy and they may not be very happy with you, but because you've given them this huge deposit, you're kind of stuck. So if you can keep to just a monthly rental relationship, that gives you the flexibility to make changes. Perhaps your family may move and you want to move with your family. So keep that in mind. And whatever you do, read the fine print. The admissions packages for all of these facilities can be voluminous, and it's important for an attorney or someone important to read those. There are a couple things you want to be careful of. You don't want to agree to arbitration or mediation if you can avoid it. And you also don't ever want to sign the admissions paperwork on behalf of someone else. So for example, if your mother is being admitted into an assisted living facility and you're her power of attorney, you want to sign as power of attorney. You don't want to sign your name because then you're going to be personally financially responsible for that contract. So if you're the trustee or power of attorney, sign in that capacity. So now is where Medicaid comes in. In assisted living and in a CCRC, you may have long-term care insurance that would assist with some of these costs, but Medicaid does not help unless you reach the level of a skilled facility. Again, like we mentioned, a skilled facility, a SNF, is what we would traditionally have thought of as a nursing home back in the good old days. These are also the rehabs. So if you're in the hospital, you're discharged for rehab, that's generally where you're going to be. And you want to look for all the same things we've discussed: staff, the smell, the campus, the convenience, etc. And also when you're in a skilled facility, you have the ability to have what they call care plan meetings. That's something that you can request at least once a quarter, if not more frequently, where you have everyone on the staff in the room at the same time. The therapist, the nutritionist, the activities director, the director of nursing. Everybody is in the room at the same time to talk about the care of your loved one. Those are super important. And if you don't ask about them, sometimes they just have them without even telling you. So make sure you ask for those. And then there's memory care, the saddest of all of these, but a necessary, very often a necessary evil. I hate to say this, but these are really like what we used to call insane asylums. It's pretty much what memory care is. It's a locked facility, a locked wing of a building or a locked ward where people cannot wander out, obviously, and get in danger. There's a lot of medical and chemical management there, sadly. But some are far better than others. So again, look at all the same things that we've talked about: staff, the campus. So let's talk a minute about costs. The average cost nationally of assisted living ranges from $3,000 to $6,000 a month. That's average. That averages out to be about $36,000 to $75,000 per year. Now, if you were in memory care, you add about 30% to that for memory care. Now, remember, hey, that sounds pretty affordable. But on top of that are also the costs that you're going to incur for supplies, clothes, shampoo, diapers, sheets, laundry, snacks, trips, hairdresser, all of that. And on top of that, you're also, the facility itself is going to increase their rates on an annual basis. And you also have an increase in your monthly expenses based on the level of care that your loved one is going to need. When you move into an assisted living, they're going to do an assessment. Does the person need help with feeding? Do they need help with dressing? Remember the ADLs. Do they need help with the 4 activities of daily living? And as those needs increase, your monthly cost is going to increase. Med management is also an added. Or do they need an escort to reminders for meals, etc. So every time your loved one needs more care, that monthly cost goes up. What's the cost of skilled care? A skilled care on average is $8,000 to $10,000 a month. Remember, this is the nursing home kind of level of care. That comes to about $96,000 to $120,000 a year. And again, you'll also have those other expenses: clothes, the supplies, the snacks, all of that. And in addition, if in my experience, I also want to have a private duty caregiver checking on my clients or my loved ones, if not weekly, maybe twice a week, twice a month, to go by and check on especially if you live at a distance of your loved one, you can hire a private caregiver to go there and check on your loved one. That's also an added expense, but a very well spent expense. Many facilities have their own in-house caregiver services, which can be helpful at times, but I prefer hiring an outside caregiver because I kind of want them to rat each other out. I feel like if the caregiver in the facility, they're not really going to rat out the facility because obviously that caregiver company wants to be on good terms with the facility. So I feel like I'm getting a little more objective care and that I know they're working for me and my loved one if I hire someone from the outside. It's just my personal opinion. All of this is my personal opinion. So the CCRCs, the average buy-in cost, that check that they kind of a deposit, for lack of a better word, ranges from $100,000 to $500,000. But on top of that, you also have monthly rent. And that can vary from $900 to $11,000. So not only are you doing this deposit that they promise they're going to take care of you, whatever level of care you go in, you're also going to have to pay monthly rent. So I know these costs sound staggering, but let's remember our statistics. Okay. 1 in 4 of us are really going to have to experience more than 2 years in skilled care. That's that nursing home level. So here's some pointers, general pointers when you're looking at facilities. Always get advice before signing the contracts. Mentioned that briefly. Never sign on behalf of someone else. If you're a power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, or trustee, always sign in that capacity.
And Darby, can I interrupt you right there and say, how do you sign as power of attorney? Someone asked, is there special wording you have to say when you sign as power of attorney?
Yes, there is actually. And it kind of changes depending on the contract or the situation. For example, if you're selling real property or buying a car or whatever. So at the facility, ask them, I'm the power of attorney. How would you like for me to sign it? Sometimes it's Darby Jones, comma, power of attorney. Sometimes it's Darby Jones as power of attorney for Susie Smith. So make sure you make it clear with whoever the admissions person is that you're signing what they want to have on that document. Good question. I guess I'm back to the don't believe everything the admissions people say. They're just salespeople. You got to remember, they are just selling beds. So you can't always say, for example, your mom has a little dog that needs walking every 3 times a day. The salesperson's go, oh yeah, we've got someone that can walk the dog. No problem. Sure. Yeah. No. That's 6 months later, that person's gone and we haven't found another dog walker. So don't always believe everything that they want you to buy. They want you to come in and fill their bed. So just keep that in mind. It's not, you're not really buying a car, but you are being sold something. You want to visit more than once, go to a facility more than once, go at a different time of day, go at an unexpectedly, show up. Once you're there, again, resist using their in-house caregivers unless you really develop a relationship with them and trust. And if you have someone in a facility, you want to butter up the staff. The most important person in your loved one's life is what they call the CNA, a certified nursing assistant. That's the person that's putting their hands on your loved one. They're the ones helping them to the bathroom. They're the ones helping them in the shower. They're the ones helping them get dressed and groomed. Those are the people that work so hard and are so underpaid and underappreciated. But if you have a loved one in a facility, show them the love. Bring pizza, bring donuts, bring gift cards, because they really are the ones that make or break the quality of life for your loved one in a facility. You also want to butter up the roommate if you have one. If you have a double room and the roommate's television always blaring, or maybe they'd never get any visitors, always make good terms with the roommate so that when something awkward comes along, you're in a good position to be able to have cooperation. You also want to be careful of laundry. Clothes disappear. You can put names all over it. You can sew labels in, and inevitably you're going to show up and everything is topsy-turvy. She's wearing somebody else's clothes. I've had clients, I show up and they're wearing men's pants instead of their own women's clothes. It's really, I don't mean to be laughing about it, but it really is just a reality. So if you, let's say, have a private duty caregiver visiting once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, maybe you can have that caregiver also do the laundry. Or if you can do the laundry, that's even better. So now let's talk about another option. Talked about assisted living, talked about skilled care, we talked about continuing retirement communities. But now there are other options. You know, for many, many years, this was it. But the truth is, there is a real resurgence in people desiring to age in place. I'm 100% in favor of that concept if it's workable. And if it's right for you, okay? Sometimes it's a facility has been a great answer and a great resource for families. Some people love living in a more congregate environment. They love the social activities. They love the security. They love having their meals made. So there are times when a facility is the right answer. But I want you to also think that there's also the opportunity that aging in place might be the right answer. So how does that work? Aging in place does not necessarily mean at your home, the home you're in right now. It could mean a downsized home. It could mean a condo. It could mean a 55 or older community. It could mean a villa. It could mean a lot of things. So don't discount the option of being able to stay home. And we're going to talk about the finances in a couple of minutes. We're getting kind of tight here on time, and I apologize. So 80% of the population in America want to stay home and pass, but only 20% ever actually achieve that goal. So aging in place is something I want you all to think about as a possible option. In fact, the March issue of the AARP Bulletin had an article. I don't know if you all get the bulletin or not, but it was a great article talking about hubs. And I think it's brilliant. What a new idea on the horizon is that, in fact, communities themselves, where wellness and social services can be arranged in the communities themselves. So rather than living in a congregate environment, you're going to take a whole neighborhood and maybe, you know, share the cost of having transportation or maybe in-home doctor visits and that kind of thing shared in a community environment, which I think is a beautiful idea. But regardless of the choices, I want you to go back to those thoughts that we had about who are you, your family history, what is your personal personality, what do you really like, what is quality of life to you? So here, let's talk about the financial considerations. And again, don't always assume that aging in place is the most expensive place, because there are a lot of services that you can bring to the home that you may not otherwise have thought about. The Aging Life Care Association, where you can find a care manager to come in and maybe do an assessment of the house, put in grab bars, change the lighting, move any dangerous carpets out of the way, give you a reliable resource for caregivers and so forth to make it a safe environment. There's all kinds of technology, cameras, motion detectors. They have mechanical and talking pillboxes. So there's a lot, and the technology is just booming in this area to make it more feasible to be able to telemedicine, the whole thing. So it's becoming more and more of an opportunity. We've got adult daycare that's available, and adult daycare averages about $66 to $100 a day. That's a great option, and a lot of communities have really great adult daycare programs. So I'm going to get down to the finances here. So in summary, the cost of an assisted living, again, we talked about that. It can be, you know, $36,000 to $75,000 a year. The pros of an assisted living are there's no maintenance. They have activities. They have organized social events. They prepare all the medications. Your meals are prepared. There's 24-hour supervision, and there's transportation available. The cons are you lack your privacy. Seems like there's a lot of infections and diseases that pass more readily, loss of personal items, far more many falls in facilities. Again, there's gravity everywhere, not just at home. Gravity is in every place we go, but falls happen far more frequently in facilities than in your home. You have complaints about the food. The hygiene is generally limited, and the monthly increases in care. So you've got pros and cons of assisted living. Pros and cons of staying at home. The cost may be expensive, but maybe the expense is not as bad as you thought it was. First of all, a caregiver cost is about averages $28 an hour. It can go from 25 to 35, depending on the level of care that you're looking for. Now, also you have the cost of the house itself, utilities, the taxes, the insurance, the repairs, the food, the gas, all of that is going to continue to be an expense. But the pros are you have your independence, you have your privacy, your dignity, one-on-one attention, personal care and menu, keep your pets, companionship, familiar surroundings. You're going to be more mobile and active, fewer falls, and better quality of life. But again, you've got the downsides are the home maintenance and the dealing with the caregivers and staffing, which can be done through a care management person. So that's that. You can start with at home. Let's say you use caregivers for 4 hours. It's generally a 4-hour minimum. If you have someone coming one time a week, that's $6,000 a year. If you have someone coming twice a week, that's $12,000 a year. If they're coming for 8 hours, that's more. One time a week is $12,000 a year. Twice a week is $24,000 a year. Now, if you need 24-hour care, let's say you really have a serious need. For example, you would otherwise be in a skilled facility or even maybe a memory care ward where you need 24-hour care. That's going to be $250,000 a year just for the care. But remember, go back to the cost of those assisted livings. The skilled care, what was it? Skilled care was $120,000 a year. So you're talking about another $100,000+ for being at home with 24-hour care. So let's talk about how you're going to pay for this. Long-term care insurance, or can you self-insure? Now that you've kind of realized the monster in the closet about long-term care, based on what your family history is, what's the likelihood of you being in a nursing home? What's the likelihood of you being there more than 2 years? So let's say you are there for 2 years and it's in a skilled facility, and that's what would that be? $400,000. You might be able to self-pay. You might have that in your savings to be able to pay for your skilled care. So maybe you don't need long-term care insurance. That's the worst case scenario. So that's the monster in the closet, $400,000 or $500,000. So you might be able to self-insure. You don't want to over-insure yourself because many long-term care policies almost never get used because people don't even know they have them, or they don't ever actually come into being. So back into your long-term care policy. Don't just be sold the Cadillac when you may only need a scooter. Remember, only 1 in 4 are going to need skilled care. That's the most expensive for over 2 years. And you don't want to be looking at long-term care until you're over 65 as well. So if you want, I can stop here. We probably have hopefully some good questions in the chat. I could talk a little bit about Medicaid if you want me to. Otherwise, I think I'll stop and see what's going on in our control booth.
There's someone who just, go ahead, Michelle.
So we didn't get a ton of questions, but we are getting some things for sharing those resources. Don't worry if you didn't get to check out those resources in chat. You are going to get a follow-up email, and I'm going to have these resources, all of the resources that Darby has been talking about, and some others that I think will be helpful to you. So Helen asked, what if you age in place and you can't find a caregiver because there's just nothing available? Maybe you live in a rural community where, your options are slim. What do you do?
That is absolutely a problem. That is a problem. I think if that's the case, there's probably not a lot of assisted living facilities either. That would be a challenge. But if there is one in near where you live, a facility of some kind, I would go to that facility and ask them if there's someone, a staff member or someone that might be available to serve as your caregiver privately. Because at least they've gone through the employment regime that they'd have to pass in order to work at that facility. The risk you run by hiring friends and neighbors and all of that is, how do you know if they have a valid driver's license? How do you know that they have a criminal background check? And you're also exposing yourself to liability for them to sue you. And if you're paying them, you've got to withhold taxes and all of that. So it is a challenge in a rural area. And I'm not sure that there's an easy answer for that, but I would go to the nearest facility to you and see if there's someone that may be available.
And Chandra mentioned Aging Life Care Association as a potential resource.
Oh, absolutely. That is, I use that website almost daily. You go in there, you put your zip code, and that you could find people who are certified senior care managers, and they may be able to find a caregiver for you. If not, they themselves might be able to provide some services. I also see a question here about hospice in skilled facilities. That happens actually quite frequently. And most facilities are fine with having hospice services come in and provide care. Remember, hospice is also different everywhere, but hospice is not necessarily caregiving. They're not going to be there on a daily basis. They usually are there maybe once or twice a week, provide minimal care. It's really more of a nursing and medical services that they're going to step in and maybe take over the medical management. If the person on hospice experiences symptoms that are unmanageable, then they will be able to bring a nurse bedside. But they typically don't have someone there all the time. So it's really doable within a skilled facility. That's not a problem.
All right, I'm checking now. Question from Jesse. Did I hear you say that we should not look for long-term care insurance until age 65? Can you talk a little bit more in depth as to the when, how, what questions to ask? Or maybe this is another topic for one of our future sessions about long-term care insurance, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I usually say wait till you're 65 because the premiums don't really get super expensive until about that age. So getting it before that, you're probably just wasting your money on premiums. It is cheaper, you're right, Vicki, at 50, but it's not that much more when you're 65. So circumstances can change dramatically between 50 and 65. So my recommendation, again, just my personal opinion, is you're okay with waiting to 65 because you may not really need it. Remember, I hope today you went away with the feeling that, hey, you know what? I'm okay. I'm going to be able to afford my long-term care, regardless of the choices that I might make, whether it's aging in place or whether it's in a facility. It's not the big bad monster that maybe I thought it was, because the statistics will show you that the majority of people are not going to need 2 years of skilled care. That's the worst case scenario. And most of you are not going to experience that. So sometimes these long-term care insurance policies sort of over-insure because you're afraid of that worst case scenario. Now, it's always a gamble, just like car insurance. I mean, it's always a gamble, but you just want to walk into it with your eyes open and feel confident in your own personal ability to self-insure your long-term care based on your community, your family, your support, your family history, those things I asked you to really think about. Does that make sense? Yeah, here we go. That's the other thing, Lynette. Long-term care premiums, they get higher and higher and higher. And then finally you get to the point, you know what, I'm not paying anymore because it's too expensive. So that, long-term care is a squishy subject, and there are a million different kinds of policies, and they're changing dramatically. Today, they have presumably life insurance riders on them that I'm not 100% sure is a good thing. Yeah, VA benefits are also out there. It's a very different thing. Elder law attorneys are where you want to go to examine whether VA benefit route versus Medicaid, which one of those would be a better option. Generally, Medicaid is your better option. Ah, Robin, thank you. Thank you for that. Well, I'm gonna turn it back over to, we're almost at the end of the hour. I really love doing these things and I appreciate your feedback. Please tell everybody, all your friends about this. We'd like to keep this going and get the communication going and the conversation continuing. So Michelle, thank you. Thank you again for AARP.